Thank you for stepping into another VERSPRITE Roundtable. This week, we're going to be discussing something a little bit more serious than a boardroom battleground. We're going to be discussing and having organic discussion about the recent FireEye attack and what that really means to you guys when one of us gets compromised. So in this video, we're going to be unpacking what happened. We're going to be talking about what customers in the community can expect short-term and long-term, and then what this means from an operational standpoint. So I'm your host, April Brown. I'm the Director of Marketing here at VERSPRITE, and I'm going to introduce everybody in just a moment. But before we get started, I really want to preface this with a disclaimer. So we all kind of like went back and forth on what we should say and if we should even talk about this. Our inboxes are getting flooded on social media about all the things that are happening. And there's a lot of chatter within the community, some finger pointing, some standing up for the victim. And honestly, here at VERSPRITE, we just want to make it very clear that we do not celebrate in the misfortunes of another cybersecurity company's attacks or getting hacked. We definitely consider this just a lesson to the community that we're all vulnerable, and FireEye's incident could have been any of us. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce everybody now that the disclaimer is over, and then we're going to go right into it because there's a lot to unpack today. So joining us again, we have VERSPRITE CEO Tony V returning again to the roundtable. We also have Paul Miller, who's the Director of Threat Intelligence here at VERSPRITE. We have our Senior Threat Intelligence Consultant, Bethany, Keele. And then we also have Joaquin Paredes, and I hope I said that right. And he's our Managing Consultant and also the leader of our OffSec department. Today, guys, I know that this is crazy. None of us really wanted to have to like get up and talk about this. This is not like a nice topic to talk about, but I think we should just really start with what we know happened. And I'll give the floor to everybody. This is an open, organic discussion.
Yeah, so I mean, the high level is as much as it's been reported so far, and that's the important thing to start out and understand in the very beginning is the fact that, you know, this is something that's fairly recent, so there's evolving details that typically happen with any type of incident. So the incident, you know, best practices is to, you know, not make some clear assumptions and definitive assumptions in the beginning. We all know that there might be some additional details that come as the investigations, you know, go forward with the FireEye team and then the people that they're employing for forensic analysis. But what we do know is that a nation state did use its assets in order to infiltrate FireEye's infrastructure to get some of their offensive security tools. And what we do know is that some of those tools are, you know, a lot of them are open source tools that other companies use, and they may have had modifications to them. But many of the security researchers that have looked at what was compromised haven't really been overly concerned that we're talking about, you know, tools that are custom, you know, highly proprietary, and if they were, that would be more of a concern because there wouldn't be any sort of anti-patterns to detect how those attack patterns look like across the wire, across applications. But those are the high levels. I'll turn it to Paul for any additional details that I may have missed, or to Bethany.
Thanks, Tony. Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate that this has happened the way it has. The truth is that any organization in this particular industry is subject to this sort of thing occurring, and no matter how good we cover our own bases, this can happen. So yeah, I feel a little bit of empathy for FireEye's team this week just because I know they are not having a good time right now. That said, the tools that made it out in this are largely based off of known CVEs, actually completely based out of known CVEs spanning from 2014 to 2020. Most of them have patches available, so they are mitigatable, and there's a few in there that apply to fairly uncommon platforms, right? I mean, maybe not uncommon, that might be the wrong way to say it, but ones that you don't see as often. There's a couple in there for, I think there's one in there for Zoho's configuration management system, right? Which I'm sure it has a pretty large footprint around the globe, but not as common as, say, a Windows Bluekeep exploit, right? So little bit more of a targeted thing there. Uh, that said, these exploits are patchable and mitigatable, and to FireEye's credit, they gave us a list. It's on their GitHub. I'm sure if you search to find the link, a list of detection rules that we can put into our EDR systems to find these tools when they're in use. The character of a company to me is in how they respond to this sort of thing, and FireEye has done this completely by the book, and exceeded expectations by doing things like providing code like that to help us be able to do our jobs in stopping these from being used in a malicious fashion. Bethany?
Yeah, I just agree with everything you said. I think the important thing here was FireEye's response, and that instead of keeping it close to the chest and choosing to disclose it at a later date, they just disclosed it right off the bat, and they let everybody know what was out there and how to protect against these things. Another thing that I wanted to point out was that this serves as a stark reminder that everyone is vulnerable, including security companies, that no one is invincible to this. And, you know, just because something has happened to a security company doesn't mean they should be treated like the enemy, or that other companies should be pulling away from security. You know, I noticed a drop in stock for security companies such as Okta, FireEye, and a few others. And, you know, the stock prices dropped, suggesting that there's been a huge negative impact on security wise. So instead of pulling away, people should be going forward.
Yeah, one thing, this whole news story, if we want to talk about what is the nectar of what we should get out of this, it's really not about FireEye. Like, we all agree as colleagues in the industry that, this could happen to anybody, especially when the adversary is a nation state: time, energy, resources, money, etc. So what we're really talking about here in this conversation, and what we want to bring to everyone out there listening, is what sort of things are we not considering as a result of this? And this is where, we as security professionals think about we start to think about and to pontificate on why was FireEye targeted. One idea is that targeting a group of information security professionals that have an arsenal of offensive security tools is really meant to understand what are some outfits that are doing these types of engagements, like red teaming engagements. What are the tools that they are using, so that the adversarial groups could maybe modify those tools in their respective repos, maybe contaminate the supply chain of those open source mirrors, and maybe understand how they could modify them. Maybe they want to understand what one major outfit in the security industry like FireEye is using, so that they could basically target open source applications, commercial tools, to taint those sources, binaries, source code, so that they can get used and weaponized, as a Trojan horse to different types of companies out there. So that's a possibility if you're looking at long-term plays, especially with nation states where they have time, resources, and money. They might be just simply interested to know what is, they want to get a pulse on what are the white hats using, in terms of tools. And that's all. Another factor that I wanted to say is, like, if the white hats are using, let's say, 50 tools, then the true nation state would also want to basically develop the tools that are not in that list, right? That don't, because if you're using those different types of tools, there might be signature sets in the WAF inline network on the endpoint that might be able to detect different types of reconnaissance traffic, different types of injection payloads and whatnot coming from these tools. And I also wanted to say that, we're actually talking about tools that's been compromised here, where those tools obviously have and do focus on exploitation on different vulnerabilities, to Paul's point, on, that most of those vulnerabilities that are attacked by those tools, do have associated CVEs. But I think that the takeaway here is understanding the delta. What are some of the plausible things that a nation state would want to understand? What is a white hat firm using in terms of offensive tools, and for the purposes of what? But I'll turn it to you, Bethany.
So I'm really glad you brought that up because I had been seeing on some security channels just chatter about how people are going to be using these tools. And one of the things that I really took away from the discussion was that they're going to be using these tools as an attack method. So they're taking these tools, they're understanding these tools, they're understanding how companies are using these tools to protect themselves against these attacks. So it's helping them understand what kind of defensive measures are in place so that they can act around those.
I also think it's possible that we may have some visibility into the end goals of the adversary here by what tools they took. Right? It's possible they had a little bit of time to exfiltrate information here, and they chose what they took away from it. And to me, particularly the ones that applied to certain platforms that are not that common might actually be a piece of information we can use to understand what they're after. I mean, a configuration management system is very powerful for a large enterprise. Let's say they knew that a potential target was using that configuration management system and they wanted to be able to, I don't know, put infected executables in for distribution in software packages, things like that. Well, that might be why they targeted things that they targeted. Some of these tactics, techniques, and procedures they want to support may actually be some of the reasoning for which tools were taken.
And I just want to ask
Yeah.
the question of knowing what tools they were after and that they really got their hands on, isn't it more likely that like security professionals are going to be more aware of those tools? They're going to be monitoring for those more? Or really, like, what do you think the goal was in trying to do that? Because FireEye put out there that they didn't have anything taken. No customer information was taken. No zero-day information was taken. So knowing that they're going to be more on a lookout for things that are happening there, what do you think really like the goal would be for that?
So
Yeah,
that's
well,
a
I
great
mean,
point.
so
Sorry.
go ahead, Bethany.
So I was telling Paul before when this first happened that this reminds me a lot about Cobalt Strike, how the tool was taken and then operationalized for malware use. And this reminds me of that. And our discussion had been that we were going to probably see an uptick in these tools being used.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we ourselves have seen different clients that where Cobalt Strike was a medium for infection, and so that is a plausible concern. Just to reiterate for the audience, there was no 0 days that were compromised, from this tool compromise at FireEye. So that's one thing. So we're talking about largely a lot of open source tools that white hats and black hats out there are using, and so they could have just simply, depending upon the repo at FireEye that was compromised and maybe some configuration files, that might lead to some level of insight in terms of how the tools might be used. But I just wanted to reiterate, for the audience, is that really, the net of what the public should be concerned about is simply being aware that there's a campaign by a nation state that was interested of seeing how a prominent security company out there, what they were using for exploitation tool sets. And so the question is why? And that's what all of us should be wondering as professionals. Why would they take the time and effort in order to target them and get a listing of what tools they were using and how? So that's where we start to, to April's question and point was that there's from a defensive purpose, there's a lot of offensive tools, and those tools do exhibit different types of payloads when you run them, and they're all going to vary when you're doing reconnaissance, when you're doing web tiered related injection or fuzzing, any type, or even just network reconnaissance and fingerprinting and service enumeration. All of these different types of activities are supported by different functions in tools. And as April already alluded to, there's a lot of companies that have signature sets, inline network technologies, endpoint protection technologies, web application firewall technologies that actually can detect these types of attack patterns. So the net of what actually happened is not going to, it shouldn't really introduce too much of a change from the personnel and operational processes at enterprises that are looking to defend, but they want to make sure that their partners that are providing the tools, the WAFs, the inline network devices, the IPSs, the integrated antivirus or the endpoint protection solutions, EDR solutions, that they are actually updating the software. Because when we think about the FireEye tool breach, we have to think about what happened with the NSA shadow brokers breach, which I think was a lot more damning, because out of that, there came some serious exploitation campaigns. It was a similar type of breach where, in the sense that there were offensive tools that were found and exploits that were actually found, and they were weaponized. And there is no sense from us and a lot of other professionals that think that what was compromised is going to lead to some level of active weaponization in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, really, the thing that's the saving grace here is none of these are 0 days, right? It all comes back to that. The difference between this and something like what happened with the shadow brokers is those vulnerabilities were new and they had never been handled before in the wild. So a lot of research had to go in to figure out how to stop those vulnerabilities from being taken advantage of. It's that simple. And Tony, to your point earlier, I know we discussed this. It's interesting you bring up how it's a target on provider of security services to corporate entities and other organizations, not just corporate entities. But that's almost kind of like a supply chain attack, right? And I think we can talk about that more at some other point when we have a little more detail, but it's like a lateral version of that that can impact performance at a lot of different places because of one large provider being hit in this fashion.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, what we don't know is we don't know the full details. Like, this is the type of story where, the story might unfold where 1, 2, 3 months later, we find a lot more details in terms of how logical access was granted. How information, was there collusion? We saw collusion just recently with Tesla, right? And their recent incident that they had. And collusion events are on the rise. I'm not insinuating, I'm not implying. All I'm saying is that any type of incident can evolve over time as details unfold. And so, when supply chain risk is a problem and vendor risk is a problem, and it is a major conduit for successful exploitation of different companies. And so, was that a play from a nation state or an interested party, to basically see FireEye, again, a prominent, very well-known company, serving a lot of different enterprises, worldwide? Was there more to it than just somebody being curious to saying, hey, I wonder what offensive tools they're using? To me, the answer is no. Because I think that anyone that is, especially if you're a nation state and you're working for a nation state and you want to be able to kind of understand what are the white hats of the world using in places in red team outfits like at FireEye, then you could probably guess a lot and find that information pretty easily without having to, actually go through some level of sophisticated incident triggering. So, it's interesting, is all I have to say, and we'll wait to see if more information unfolds.
Yeah, I mean, from the offensive side of things, I'm actually looking forward to the details of the time, to an honest debrief, right? That gets public. I mean, we all know they all said this is state of the art, nothing seen before. So yes, as Tony was saying, I mean, that's like too much effort to just get your hands into a bunch of tools that you might already have. Again, as Tony was saying, the net outcome of this in terms of operational efforts shouldn't be large if you're already patching your systems, right? The delta isn't big, as there are no O days here on the table. But definitely looking forward to seeing the details of the attack. That's something I'm hoping they actually keep this honest position of sharing for everyone's certification in the community. So looking forward to that.
One thing that's interesting is that, depending upon the repository of tools that were compromised, I don't think that they were just after tools. I think, like many other professionals out there, that there's something else that they were after, and they may have gotten it, they may not have gotten it. But let's talk about something that we haven't talked about just yet, and that is I alluded to it in the beginning, which is like, if you're a nation state or a hacker syndicate, you want to know what is the predominant type of exploitation activity that is being done by adversaries. And so if there's ways, let's take fuzzing, for example. So let's say that you look at, you compromise a set of directories and tools that have fuzzers in there, and then you basically look at some of the output of that fuzzing activity. You might have a lot of, output files or temp files or, configuration files that show how fuzzing was actually done. And so that serves as an adversary group as like a baseline of like, okay, I see they're doing a lot of enumeration attacks. I see they're doing a lot of like, attacks against entropy of different tokens or whatever. And as an attacker, if like we're all right now sitting here and we're the actual nation state and we're the actual, hacker syndicate, it would be good to mine this information in order to basically start to think about where is there the delta? Because these are white hats that are testing and with a repertoire of abuse cases. And if we see that it's pretty common or pretty standard or there's repetitive, then it might be an opportunity for adversarial groups to say, hey, let's go ahead and plug in the delta. Long ago, when I was at a OWASP conference in DC for AppSec OWASP, I actually brought this up with one of the founders of OWASP, and I said, oftentimes, there's a lot of organizations that they wear on their sleeve, like, our governance program or our alignment on this application is aligned to, and then they enumerate all these different things, like the application security verification standard, or like 10 other different things. And I'm not trying to throw shade at any one of these things, because I think they're all like great projects. But once advertised to a public domain, and if I'm an attacker and if I'm, a criminal, then I'm going to basically, you're telling me like what you've aligned your application to. So all I'm going to do is trying to find the delta, right? Because you're making my job easier. If I look at what you've hardened against and what you aligned to, then I will try to find what other areas that are not encompassed within that particular framework that I can actually try to create some specific abuse cases. And like many of the people that has been reported on the news, that's the essence of nation state hacking, is that oftentimes the attack patterns are things that are not commonly imitated and replicated when you're doing white hat rep team exercises. And this brings up the importance of the approach, which is not really hinging on a methodology, but really hinging on creativity, right? You want people that are going to be able to think as creative and as nefarious as possible, because, it's guaranteed that a nation state with time, money, and effort are going to be doing exactly just that.
My biggest concern, and you kind of touched on it there, is this seems like a strange set of target data to be what they were after. This is fairly low value in the scheme of things with an organization that has that much IP and power behind what they do and are as large as they are. This is kind of a weird takeaway for a criminal to run away with. So I have concerns, and they are totally unfounded, because we have no detail at all at this point. I want to be clear about that. But I do have concerns that there is more to this story that maybe is being uncovered, as you said, in the next few months as we get more detail on it. But my concern is a company their size, or even with what we do, we have a lot of information on clients. We hold a very large amount of this is what keeps me up at night, right? It's like we've got vulnerability scans, we've got all this detail on what clients have, and it concerns me that could have been the real target of what was going on at FireEye, was to get that treasure trove of information. And hopefully that never comes to be, and that's not what we've got at all. But things like that seem like better more likely targets for criminal activity to go after, or nation state activity to go after, than just a few tools that are based off well-known vulnerabilities.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I agree, wholeheartedly. I think that those that are a vendor in the space serving a global cybersecurity market have the responsibility to be very vigilant and paranoid, restless stewards of data, where that data is vulnerability data, that data is schematics, that data is source code, that data is, insert, data source of concern. And it's about, protection, it's about destruction, so that there isn't that liability there. I think that one thing that we haven't talked about, and this is, I think, be interested to kind of get more of the defensive take here, is, there's an opportunity for defense to really, get a list of the tools that were compromised, review their configuration files in their respective defensive products, maybe create some custom security detection, anomaly detection type rule sets, maybe using YARA files, other types of kind of regex or pattern identification matching capabilities, where defensive teams, might recognize, okay, we might see an increase in, a certain type of attack pattern given the compromised tools. And so it's a good opportune time to do some spring cleaning or winter cleaning, as it might be, and to revisit some of the rule sets and make sure that the current defensive detection monitoring capabilities are well equipped, so that those YARA rules that are doing some level of heuristical analysis or doing some level of pattern matching can be well prepared for recon traffic, for injection-based traffic, for authentication bypass traffic, malicious file upload traffic, right? All of these different types of abuse cases. So we have an opportunity here, as defenders, to be able to, go back and see what was compromised, and just do some winter cleaning and build more sophistication into those rule sets for detection and then funneling into monitoring.
Yeah, I think right now is a really good time to be proactive in this, instead of taking the lazy route and just waiting for something to happen. Is take the information we have gained now that FireEye has put out, put it into our EDR systems, and hope for the best.
And patch. Seriously.
And patch.
I mean, there's that's the baseline for almost everything we go through on a regular basis from an attack standpoint. If you can reinforce your patching program and make sure none of the CVEs that are listed in this are available for exploit in your environment, then you'll be in a much better place. Those two things really are the key: a detection system using rules, and possibly advanced rules over the next few weeks as people start to figure out how to handle these better than even what was supplied, and then really making sure you've got these CVEs out of the way in your environment. Those are really the two key things to do.
Yeah, and it happens to me. Oh, sorry, Bethany, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it happens to me every time that I see some of these breaches or some threat actor getting his hands into something. I mean, I do think it all comes down to the very basics, and there are two things that I consider key here when you're trying to protect yourself and minimizing the impact in case of a breach. Two main concepts that I do think are pretty basic, since I've been working with them since I started my security career. First one, following the principle of less privilege. That's like one of the basic premises, right? Yeah. Subjects should be given only the privileges that they need to complete the task at the end of the day, and that's it. I mean, we have seen many times people that just because they are feeling a director position, having way more privileges on a Active Directory than they actually need to, right? So keeping it short, following principle of less privileges, that's something basic to me. And also now that we are working remotely, that we are moving our servers to the cloud, taking a zero trust strategy could also be another thing that I would now turn into something that's basic as a strategy to protect yourself. I mean, trust no one, right? There are no boundaries anymore. I mean, if you're working from the internal network, you are not supposed to be trusted anymore. I mean, there could be a threat actor going around. So those are the two things that I always think of when this happens. It all comes down to the basics, right?
I absolutely agree. Yeah. So a lot of good things to unpack here, as mentioned by everyone. The patching, incorporating things like principles of zero trust, validation, restricted access. Some improved logging and detection capabilities. All of these things are go back to the principle of understanding that security is a layered approach, and there's not one particular type of defining control or countermeasure that's going to be effective. So I think that, in the end, as we, start to finalize on our reflections of what took place with this incident, as threat modeling evangelists that we are, the threat model of at an organizational level is something that every company needs to think of, that whether it's FireEye or maybe it's an IT vendor, understanding what the implications for compromise, what are the ripple effects, what are the responses that need to happen. Threats are evolving, and our threat models should also continuously be evolving, and they should be updated at an organizational level, something that doesn't happen, as often. But I think there's a lot of great suggestions here to unpack, April. Hopefully this is beneficial, for those listening in.
Yeah, I agree. And the only thing that I really want to add to this is, as security professionals, you guys always wear 3 hats. You guys have to be defensive, offensive, but you also have to step into the role as a counselors to your clients. Right now, I think it was Bethany talked about it earlier. Stocks went down. When one of us gets hit, that definitely affects the whole community, where trust in the security professionals is starting to be questioned. Like, you might question, your clients might be questioning, do I need different security tests? Do I need to be worried about this? And this is really the time where you guys need to, while you are being proactive and you guys are trying to beef up your own defenses and really go out there and try to investigate yourselves and become a student and try to see what happened, what this is going to be, and be a psychic predictor. You need to remember that your clients are not security professionals. Your clients are being told that a major security company was breached. And even if you're not working at FireEye, this puts a cloud over your own head, where they may start wondering, well, do I need to be worried? What does this mean for me? So as we go about our day to day, we just need to remember to do touch points with our clients, have open discussions with them, tell them what you're doing, tell them what you can do, tell them what you know, because when companies and organizations start to question security, this could even be a motivation. If they're questioning security, they're not going to put their money into it. They're going to try to find alternative means to do it, whether that's automated tools, whether that is different companies. And when they do that, you don't know who's out there who is malicious, who's going to try to eat them up. So you need to be really careful about how you talk to your clients right now, just from that perspective. And that's really just all I wanted to add to this conversation is, please make sure that you remember you're wearing multiple hats. And on top of being a security professional, you're also a counselor to those who don't understand what this all means, other than something bad happened. what do I do? What does this mean for me?
Right. No, absolutely. No, those are all good points. And, you're right. Those three hats are definitely all worn. The optics for those that are not in information security is that a prominent security company got compromised. And so, it's easy to say that, there's some level of hypocrisy of not eating your own security dog food if you're not, familiar with, first of all, what is a nation state? What are the resources of a nation state? What are the capabilities of a nation state as compared to simply, just an individual hacker, that's off for college or something like that. So, there's a lot that needs to be educated in terms of what happened. But at the end of the day, first and foremost is that we all as the cybersecurity professionals, we are to some degree stewards of our clients' information. Information that's imparted to us of their business development efforts, their information, their evolving IT patterns and schematics and things like that. So we all have a conscious responsibility to make sure that controls and countermeasures are in place for data in transit, data at rest, access control, monitoring, logging, and not get comfortable. Once you basically implement everything that you feel is underneath the sun in terms of a security paradigm, that's still not enough, right? Because the threat model changes. And so your behavior of how you address those threats also needs to change. And so we always need to keep evolving, keep thinking like a criminal, like we always say at VERSPRITE, so that we can be prepared for some new and novel abuse cases when we're considering our clients' infrastructure, applications, and solutions and data. So all good points to share and reiterate with everyone listening in.
So that is actually it. We're going to start to wrap up, everyone. I just want to make sure that as a community, we keep the discussion open. Hopefully FireEye will be very transparent in the future about the continuation of their investigation. Hopefully, as these come up, I know there's government agencies involved, there's other organizations involved trying to help them. We can all learn from this as a community and really move forward. And so if you guys do have questions, please feel free to ask us. We are only a couple key points away from really reaching out and helping you guys. So if you have questions, if you want to talk about this as a community, please reach out to us. We would love to hear from you. And thank you guys all for being in the roundtable today. We definitely put this together last minute. This, like I said, wasn't something we were expecting to wake up and talk about, but I really appreciate everyone for showing up and really talking about this and helping the community. And that's it. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of the day, and we will, of course, see you on our next roundtable. Bye, everyone.